So who we are.
Yes.
You
Who are
go first.
you?
Who
Oh,
are
me first.
you?
Okay. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm a game designer and research scientist at the MIT Education Arcade, and I also run the learning game company Skylight Games.
And I'm Kim. I'm a research scientist at the Yale School of Medicine and director of the Play for Real XR lab at Yale, where we make games using XR technology.
Thank you, Kim, for being here today.
Thank you, Dan, for being here today.
So, our approach in general is we're going to look at some games, some VR games, and we're going to think about how could this be used for learning, for behavior change, for impact. So, we're looking at it from a game design perspective, looking for patterns that we like and trying to connect it with some of the theories that we're reading.
Absolutely. And then also to see how that all connects with research
Yes.
or inspiration. Yes.
So what we played this game behind me, which is Acron, Attack of the Squirrels. And so the way this game works is it's an asymmetrical VR cross-platform game. So one person's in VR and up to 8 other people are using phones or tablets to log in and play different roles. So the player plays the tree and can sort of throw chunks of wood at the squirrels, and the squirrels are trying to team up against the tree to take the acorns.
Right. And if you don't have enough players as squirrels, you can bring in some AI squirrels. For us, we played at our office at Yale. So three of my colleagues played as squirrels, and then I was in the tree. I think then we took turns being the tree, and we also had we added additional AIs just to kind of make it a little more fun. I think we also noticed too when you have the AI bots that kind of can kind of be a little bit of a tool to teach you how to play by kind of
Mm-hmm.
watching them.
Yeah.
So you definitely need enough squirrels to make the game feel a bit balanced.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And how did
Yeah.
you play? You played.
Yeah, I also played a few times. Um, at the beginning, I was just trying to rope in whoever around the lab had a free half hour. So I played with some smaller groups, and then I did get some bigger groups together. Nothing more than like 5 or 6 people, I think. So I never played with the full 8, but definitely 5 or 6 is way better than 3 or 4.
Right. And then we played together on Zoom between our two labs. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And it was a great way also to show how you can um, play this. You don't necessarily have to be local to play the game. You can still have, uh, some great conversations if you have some sort of channel for communication, like Discord channel or Zoom. We use
Mm-hmm.
Zoom. Um, yeah, and just a note too, um, the the people that played with me, generally not all of them were gamers, so they were my colleagues in my lab. Several of them were not really big gamers, and they had it was easy for them to play, and they had a lot of fun. And then also one of my colleagues actually does not tolerate VR well at all, so this was actually great for her. So she could play along and not have to be the tree. So she never asked or opted to be the tree, but it was still great because we do a lot of VR stuff, and this was something she could actually join in and play.
Yeah, that's a great segue to this really being a nice first VR experience for people. And I think the cross-platform aspect is really helpful there. Because when we were playing, um, yeah, I noticed a whole bunch of people who had not tried VR before and maybe were a little bit intimidated by it. And they would start off playing as the squirrels on their phones. And usually I would take the role of the tree, probably because there weren't other volunteers at that point. And I was, so we were all, this is back when we could all physically be together. And so we were all in a conference room, and I would I'd cast my view from the Quest to like a big projector or something. And I thought that people would be really into that, but actually they were so focused on their phones. So in that sense, the casting didn't make that big of an impact, but I think it was really helpful for people to be able to get a sense of what the game is, both
Mhm.
from playing it on their phones and from maybe watching me a little bit. Um,
Mhm.
and then, yeah, over time, people were like, "Hey, can I try the headset?" So
Right.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just a good first VR experience because it's an easy, a fast learning curve. The tree doesn't do much, right? And it's stationary. You don't have to worry about boundaries and walking around. And I think a lot of people get nervous about being in VR for that they're just not going to know what to do once they're in. So you're stationary, and you have very few things you can do. You can throw things, you can pick things up, but that's really all that you can do. So there's not a lot that you have to know to be able to be the tree.
Yeah, and that's important for a couple of reasons. One, just movement in VR. If it's not one to one with you like physically walking around a space, if you're pushing a button or using the thumbstick or something to move, uh, that first of all, it's a learning curve. You have to learn that interface and that mechanic. And if you're not a gamer, that's another thing to think about. But also, that's one of the things that, depending on the movement system, can make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, yeah, I think for a first time VR experience, having it just stationary, you're just standing in one place, you're looking around, you're moving your arms. I think that's perfect.
Yeah. I think even just the tutorial part of before you even play the game, it's a great VR experience to be like, I am a tree. And
Yeah.
and you practice throwing things, like for somebody that not with or without the squirrels, it's like a great thing to step into, I think.
Yeah.
Because the environment's really nice, and you're getting a feel for the controllers, and you're not necessarily going to get sick, or that kind of sick feeling when you first try
Hmm.
VR. So I bet, yeah, just even the tutorial part of just playing around with it is, I think, was really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also something about being a tree in a world of squirrels that makes you feel really powerful. You're like, I'm 100 times taller than you are.
The concept's actually brilliant, right? And if you
Yeah.
think when you look down at your hands, and your hands are tree hands, they're
Hmm.
branches, and it's really actually quite nice if you
Hmm.
think about it that way. I liked it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked it too.
Yeah.
One more thing I think about VR that sometimes people are self-conscious about it, uh, especially if they're conscious of how people are looking at them, and then they put on a headset and they're like, "Oh, I don't know what I look like, and I'm moving my arms around, and I probably look silly." I felt like this was actually a better game than many for that because almost everyone else is also playing and they're just staring at their phones, so they're not actually staring at the VR player. But I think that made it less intimidating to then take on the role of VR.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think when you think like we make a lot of games for teens, middle school, high school, and teens are already self-conscious about everything else anyway, regardless if they have a VR headset on. And a lot of kids are reluctant to put a VR headset on just because they're worried about what they look like in with a VR headset. So they may be less likely to even engage or play just because they're really concerned about what people see when they're wearing a headset, because they can't see them, and they of course feel like everybody's looking at them, which they're not. So that it is a, I think in terms of options, I like it as a cross-platform game because you don't have to play in VR if you don't want. You can play as a squirrel, or you don't have to play at all. You can. It's also a really fun game just to watch, and listen to others play. So I agree.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the learning curve. How do people actually learn to play this game? And because that's one of the main interests that we bring to looking at this at all is like, what can we take from this for our work? So I think so. The VR player has a tutorial, and presumably, whoever bought the game, you only have to buy the game once for the VR headset, and then the mobile is free. But whoever bought the game probably went through the tutorial at some point, so they have some sense of how the game works. It is a party game, so you would presume that people are going to be trying this out in a group setting, probably for the first time, a lot of them. So they'll maybe be on their phone or they'll be on the headset and they won't have gone through the tutorial necessarily because the tutorial is a single player thing. So if you're in a group, that's kind of antisocial to be like, everyone, wait a minute while I go through the tutorial. So the way I ended up doing it in most of the groups that I played with is I would start off as the tree. Sometimes I'd give other people an option, but they were generally like, you go for it. So I would start off as the tree and run them through getting the mobile app set up and into the game. And then generally people would be a little bit disoriented playing for the first time. Some of them are gamers, some of them might not be gamers. So they need a minute to just like figure out the controls or like what their character class does or something like that. So I almost took my role as the tree more like a game master, where I wasn't just trying to instantly kill them or knock them out. There's no death in Acron. I wasn't trying to knock them out. I was trying to sort of give them a little bit of space to experiment and figure out what's going on. And I might throw a chunk of wood at them so they know that's what's going to happen, but not be super aggressive about like actually trying to knock them out. Like I throw it near them or I'd throw slower than I normally would. Um, so I think that was helpful. I don't know if every player would do it that way, but I think the experience of being a squirrel, trying to figure out what the game is all about, what's my role, what are the controls, what are the classes, how do I work together, while you're getting like instantly killed or knocked out by the tree, like that's just a little bit overwhelming. So I was trying to smooth out the learning curve, kind of reduce the cognitive load a bit, because if you get overloaded, then it's just like noise and it's frustrating. So I wanted to create a nicer experience. And the game doesn't really do that for you. You have to do that as a player, I think. So there's a lot of like peer learning and teaching going on. Um, so yeah, it reminds me of um, discovery learning that Piaget talks about, where you, like as kids are sort of experimenting with things and learning as they go. So there's a lot of space for that because there's no squirrel tutorial, and different players can try different classes of squirrel. I think there's 4 classes, and figure out how it goes, um, become the expert in that class, and then maybe try to teach their peers. So there's some peer learning going on. Um, and I think socially, we're all constructing what another researcher, Vygotsky, would call scaffolding. So we're thinking about like what can a player learn from what they know, maybe with a little bit of help from a peer or something else. Um, and so I was conscious of that in the tree role as more of a game master, and then also in the squirrel roles, where squirrels were working together to teach each other.
Right. In terms of peer learning, I think that kind of 2 thoughts. One, you're right about like the tutorial part. Like no one for a party game wants to take 20-30 minutes to try to figure out and learn the rules. Like, yeah, nobody wants to take 20 or 30 minutes to learn the rules. Like that's the fastest way to kill a party and a party game. So I understand and get why there is no like real sense of a tutorial for the squirrels. And it is one you almost have to just know the first time you play as a squirrel, the first 1 or 2 times, you're just not going to quite get it. And then you play it again and then you start to understand. But like with the peer learning, I think you're right. I think one of the coolest part about this game is there you have to listen to others. Like there's a lot of listening. There's a lot of, oh, what'd you do? Or what'd you play as? Like, oh, how did you do that? Like, how do I do this? That is the best way to learn. And interestingly enough, you have this tree who's also listening, who's the one that's actually trying to beat the squirrels, right? So then any type of strategy or anything that the tree is listening to. So it's just really this interesting kind of way discussions and conversations are happening in tandem to each other. So there is a ton of strategy that's happening before the gameplay, like during the gameplay, and then after the gameplay, kind of that wrap up of like, what did you do? How, where did you fail miserably? Where did you do well? What everyone's like, oh, I like this squirrel the best. I like the tunnel squirrel. He's the best. That's who I play every time. And so I think it is those conversations. And I'm thinking more about like a lot of the games that I'm wanting to work on and create in our lab is incorporating more of that cooperative learning and that opportunity for discussion and peer learning, because that's, and you're right. I mean, that's where we think of social cognitive theory, right? It's that most of our learning happens socially. We're learning through watching others, listening to others, whether they're making mistakes or making progress. Like, that's how we learn. So this is a great game idea for this sense of social learning. So I'm interested to see how some of those mechanics might be adapted to a learning game where we can incorporate some of those ideas of pushing discussions and social learning and peer learning kind of forward without pushing it in a way that is obvious, right? Where it's just kind of happening. I couldn't imagine people playing this game without talking to each other.
I feel like if we do it one more time, we're going to win.
Yeah.
But only this stage. This stage is the only reasonable stage.
Is there somebody still in sudden death that's alive?
Yep. It's all on you, mobile.
That's
me.
That's right, mobile.
So I've noticed no one's building any bridges.
Bridges?
Yeah,
I didn't know that I could build a bridge.
Cognitive load of this game is large.
Yeah. Any reflections or new strategies you want to try next time?
I'm going to dig tunnels everywhere.
Tunnels are wonderful because everybody can use the tunnels. That's what's
Right?
cool. Yeah.
And they make you feel safe, and also you go a little bit quicker, I feel like.
Yes.
Shield guy, if he is holding a shield and goes in the tunnel, drops his shield, which is a little sad.
Aw.
And
But
also,
the shield then is just an obstacle, so that's okay.
another good strategy is if you're the fast guy, the guy that has a little speed burst. If you save your burst until you get the acorn, that kind of helps. But then just don't jump off a ledge. Don't speed off the ledge.
I like what you said about the tree listening in on the communication with the squirrels. Sometimes as a squirrel, like, I would hide behind the tree. Like, if you can sneak behind the tree, because the tree, like, the goal or the activity for the tree in VR, it's mostly attention management. And that's why it's much harder if there's more squirrels, because you're like, oh, there's a squirrel over there. There's a squirrel over there. And like, especially as one gets farther away and it's carrying an acorn and it's harder to hit, and you're like super focused on that squirrel. And then other squirrels can sort of come in the periphery and maybe go by unnoticed. So I'd try to sneak behind the tree as a squirrel, and I would wait there for a while, hoping like the tree's going to forget about me. And I wanted to tell the other squirrels, like, hey guys, I'm behind the tree. But I didn't say that because I know the tree's listening. So,
Right.
yeah. So I really liked the digger character because it felt like it protected me a little bit, gave me a beeline away from the tree back towards, basically it's capture the flag. So you're trying to go back to your flag. And it gives you a little bit of a speed boost. So I'd go out from under the tree, grab an acorn, like make a beeline. And then as soon as I ran out of my speed boost, I came up from being underground and my digging was still on cooldown. So I couldn't go right back to digging. Then I would do like a zigzag because I know like, oh, the tree is probably focused on me right now. And the most satisfying thing as the squirrel was hearing like the tree player's groans of like, stop zigzagging.
And the tunnel squirrel is also an important character. I think one of the most important squirrels, because he's also building tunnels for others.
Mm-hmm.
And I even remember when we were playing, I think it was my colleague Veronica's like, there wasn't a squirrel building bridges. And she's like, where's the squirrel building bridges? We need bridges. And so the tunnel squirrel, again, like there is that sense of cooperative, like the tunnels aren't just for you, they're for your team.
Yeah.
And you really kind of rely on those, that somebody's going to be the tunnel guy.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the tunnels are great. I did occasionally go through a tunnel that already existed that I didn't mean to go through. Like I got so close to my flag and then there was a tunnel there and then I like accidentally went back toward the tree. I was like, oh, and then I think I got knocked out. So they can work against you. Speaking of the bridge builder, the nice thing about that, especially in a VR context, is you build up. So you can actually block the view of the tree. And the whole job of the tree is to like be able to see the field and know where things are. So of course they can knock down the bridges with the chunks of wood, but it's just one more thing to do. So I think the bridge builder is really powerful, but because the squirrels don't really control their cameras, it can become challenging to actually build a bridge and stay on it. I think a lot of the bridge builders were accidentally falling off their own bridges.
Yeah. So that is a good point you brought up about the kind of the perspective taking, right? And the kind of the limitations to the game in the sense of the camera and the environments, right? For me, I know I mentioned this a few times and I was embarrassed by it a bit, was that I got, as a tree, I was fine. I could see and understand the terrain and how the squirrels were coming at me. I could see where, like, it all made sense as a tree looking down on the environment. As a squirrel, I would get turned around and lost so easy. So if I did end up in a tunnel and off to the right, I'd be so turned around and have absolutely no idea where I was, which was really quite frustrating. So I think that was one limitation, like the perspective taking for me. Though I do like the idea of perspective taking, of you're in the same game and you are taking the perspective of different roles. But I think there can be some frustration in the squirrel and the camera view from the squirrels, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they made a choice to privilege the perspective from the tree, which, this is a VR game, so I totally understand that. Looking around as a tree is so natural for the tree. It's in VR, it's set up that way. I think that makes a lot of sense. For the squirrels, if they could control their camera and had to control their camera, it would be one more thing to manage. So for non-gamers, that would just be a barrier to get into it. And it would also take your attention away from the tree. So then you'd be maybe more surprised when you're getting hit by the things that the tree is throwing at you. But depending on the map, some of the maps had like edges of the play space that you could fall off. And so that was really disorienting. You'd be like running backwards away from the tree toward your flag. And then you don't want to go straight because that's too predictable. So you'd be trying to like go around the edges or something. And then suddenly you've fallen off the world. That was pretty frustrating.
Yeah, that happened a lot to me. I fell off ledges and into pits and into water all the time. Yeah, and it was mostly the confusion of from the camera, for sure. That makes me feel a little bit better then.
Yeah. It's not just you.
Nobody in our team ever mentioned, oh, I'm so confused and turned around. But boy, I tend to get turned around a bit. Yeah.
So that connects back to the learning curve and learnability, and combined with the camera control. So the tree is throwing wood chunks at the squirrels. There's a few different kinds. There's a little wood chunk that goes really fast and is sort of a little bit hard to see coming. There's a bigger one that is easier to see coming and it comes slower, and that one can actually get you if it lands on the ground and then kind of rolls toward you. So you do sort of see it coming, and then you can either try to dodge it, or if you're not able to dodge it, you're like, oh, all right, that I saw it coming. I probably could have dodged it. That felt fair. But with the little ones that just come so fast, it almost felt undodgeable for most of the players. And so that was just really frustrating. I think people were like, not again. And if if you feel like you have no control or no ability to anticipate or react, then I think that can tip from fun and learnable into frustrating noise. And this is just a problem that I've seen across so many fast action games, Dota clones, etc., where, especially as a newer player, knowing why you got knocked out, like what just happened, that is, so game designers can address this in a bunch of different ways. Sometimes they have like after action reports where after you get knocked out, it's like, here's who damaged you, or there's a replay or something like that. Personally, I think maybe lowering the chance that the tree actually hits you with a little wood chunk would be a nicer play experience. I don't know what the right balance is, if it's like 50% of the time that a good throw or a pretty good throw would hit the squirrel and 50% chance that the squirrel would be able to dodge it. I think that could be satisfying. Right now, it feels like the squirrel has no chance. So
It can feel unbalanced quickly, especially if you have a very aggressive tree player. There feels like there's no hope. It can be very frustrating to where you're like, I don't want to play this anymore, or at least I don't want to play with that tree anymore.
Yeah.
So,
And that happens more for smaller groups. So if you have like 2 or 3 squirrels versus a tree, you'll just like, there's not enough distraction for the tree. So there's too much attention on each squirrel and the squirrels have no hope. So that's why it's critical to have a bigger group. I think 4 squirrels is probably the minimum that I would do. And then, playing long enough where the squirrels can start to develop some strategies. And often when I was playing with, a group of friends, we would end after like 30, 45 minutes with the squirrels finally turning the tide and being able to like get all the acorns away from the tree. And that was so satisfying for everyone. I mean, definitely for the squirrels, who are the majority of the players in the group, but also for if I was playing the tree role, and acting more as a game master and probably hosting the party, then I wanted everyone to be having a good time. So even though I'm losing, I'm feeling good about how the whole game's going.
right. Well, and I think you mentioned this before too, but it kind of the idea of building your expertise. You can choose one squirrel and become an expert at that, which makes you valuable to your team. But then it also is it can feel rewarding in and of itself that maybe I just keep playing the tunnel squirrel and I become better and better and better. And then that's something I'm good at. And that's something that's also valuable to my team. I think it would feel different if you were a random squirrel every time. That would kind of probably suck. Or I get hit every time, right? If I'm a slow squirrel, that kind of doesn't really have I need to be kind of quick and so I can move out of the way. And so I mean, I like that you can kind of pick and choose where you feel that maybe your skills are best and kind of build those, which is great for social learning when we think about that in terms of teams. We like to find those that are maybe perhaps are the leaders, maybe those that are kind of fall back and do some of the back end work that we don't, think about, like the bridges and the tunnels. So yeah, I like that part of it.
So one thing about this being a cross-platform game is, we talked about that being a nice on-ramp for people going from mobile into VR and how it's a nice first-time VR experience, which is great because people have said the best thing right now to do in VR is show people VR. But not everyone wants to or is able to get into VR. And so I think for that reason, especially if you're thinking about a learning game or a game for impact that might be in a school setting, you want to make sure that everyone is able to get involved in some way. And so having it be cross-platform just means that the person who really, gets really motion sick, doesn't want to put on the headset, doesn't want to mess up their hair, doesn't want to look awkward, has a physical limitation in some way, whatever the reason, that they are still able to engage and participate, even if it's not from within VR. So I like that design pattern.
I agree. been spending a lot of time this last 6 months talking to teachers about implementing games in schools, and one of the big things that kind of keeps coming out as this idea, or this theme of inclusion and adaptability. And what do you do when you have kids that can't necessarily, even when we think about even web-based games or app-based games, that might even be a struggle for them. So the idea that you can stream this onto another monitor from inside the Quest, and you can watch others play. You can always have somebody outside of the game giving advice and helping to strategize before and during, like coaching, and helping, being that eye from kind of from the back, of like, why don't you guys try this next time? Or I think it can still be an inclusive game without necessarily even having to play, if that makes sense. You're still playing, it's just in a different way. So always kind of thinking of how to adapt those games in a way, or consider, maybe not even adapting, but also just consider the limitations and give options for ways to be inclusive.
Yeah, I love that. And one thing that I would love to see the developers add to this game is an extra camera for spectation. Because if I think about what view I want to show, like connect to a projector or a big TV or something to make it more inclusive for a bigger room, I would hesitate to have it be the VR camera, because head movement in VR, you're doing this and the view is just going all over the place. Even for people who don't have the headset on, that can be uncomfortable, just watching a screen with so much head movement. So, and it's harder to connect, I think, the Squirrel cameras to a big projector. I mean, that might be something that I'd prefer because it has a more stable camera. But if the game had a feature where there's just like one extra tree, that's not even a player tree, it's just something holding a camera, and the camera is not moving around, but it gives you a bird's eye view of the play space, I think that would probably be what I prefer for projecting.
Yeah, I think that could have big implications too, because it's again taking it from a whole other, a third perspective of not just the tree and not just the squirrels, but what's happening in the overall scene, which is really kind of a whole other way of looking at something, which is kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. Great. So any final thoughts you want to share?
So my final thoughts, I think it's a fun game. I like that it's cross-platform. I like that it's a multiplayer game. I like that it's kind of adding to this genre of party games. And as I mentioned before, I really like that it's, it's inclusive. So, a lot of people can play it. I'd like to see more games like this, and I'd like to see how we can move this kind of cross-platform gaming into some serious games, or learning games, specifically maybe around, oddly enough, around health, because when you think about attitudes and beliefs and knowledge and perceptions, often that's that's kind of translated between people, right? When we sit and we talk, or with our peers, or we play together, or whatever. So oddly enough, I think it would be interesting to see how we can kind of elicit conversations and discussions around certain topics through this type of play. So that's kind of my takeaway. Yeah, and I'd like to see more games like this. I think it was a fun game. It had some good and bad things, but overall I thought it was a good game.
Yeah, I liked it too. I'm a fan of the genre. There's a bunch of games that are sort of in and out of VR, cross-platform, cooperative, or maybe with a bit of competition in there. I'm thinking about like Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes, or Black Hat Cooperative, or Covert, or there's a few others. And then of course this continues the trend from even before VR with like Nintendo Land, or things on the Wii U where you have like the main display and a tablet, and so you have like your secret display and you can have roles. So I like that genre. I'd like to see that genre continued, especially I think now that people are transitioning into VR. I think it's a great fit. I love the peer learning as a as an approach, as a design philosophy, especially for learning games. So I'd love to see more cooperative things where you can take on different roles and see each other play. You have to work together, but you can also learn from each other, give each other feedback. I think too much of the learning that traditionally happens in schools is set up as a competition where it's like every student against every other student because we have to rank you. And if you talk to each other, it's cheating. I much prefer the kind of learning where it's like, all right, let's all work together and figure this out. So yeah, I'd love to continue playing games like that and build that more into the games that you and I make.
Yes. And then as another thought too, I agree, like with the learning aspect. This game, you fail miserably as a squirrel many times, which is one of the great things about games and learning, right? Is you can, I wish more of life was like this, where it's good and it's encouraged to fail and fail and fail before you succeed, and there's not any repercussions to that with your grades or your GPA or how well you're kind of scored in class. So the idea that you're just plan to fail a lot at first is a great message when it comes to learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love it. So what do you want to play next?
Well, I heard you want to play the climb.
Yeah, I've already started playing it. Yeah, my back is sore.
So that's it. Then we'll play the climb and we'll see what we can come up with in terms of learning and behavior change.
Okay, yeah, I think we're going to learn a bit about embodiment with that one.
Oh, you give it away.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert.
So stay tuned.
Thanks, Anne.
We'll see y'all next time. All right, thanks.
Bye.